one bad man at the epicenter, but every ripple out, hundreds and hundreds of good people we knew, strangers, really just showing up and blessing us.
Welcome to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, an international speaker, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This is a space where you belong, not because you earned it, not because of your title, your paycheck, or number of kids you have, but just because you are human and you are good. Here we explore progress over perfection, emotional and spiritual wellness, and how to relish the good parts of life that coexist with the not so good parts. This is Happiness in Progress. I am so glad you're here today, and I am so excited that I get to introduce you to one of my oldest friends, one of my friends from college, Noelle Rasmussen. In this conversation, we talked about a very scary and very traumatic experience that she had on Christmas Day in 2020. Many of you will remember this Christmas. It was our first Christmas in the pandemic. You might also remember there was a bombing in Nashville on Christmas Day. That bombing happened right outside of Noelle's home. In this conversation, we are going to talk about that experience, what that was like living through that, how Noelle followed the voice in her head to leave during the evacuation, finding healing for herself, finding healing for her 4-year-old, and this incredible perspective she has about finding blessings in the bombing. That and a whole lot more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So let's get to it. Noelle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to reconnect.
I know. So we've known each other for a million years, and we also have spent almost that exact amount of time trying to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So I'm
Mom life with littles is so unpredictable.
Yeah, it is not for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. So we are going to talk a little bit about this horrible trauma that you went through and that really you still live with. And I think maybe we'll just start at what happened. So take me back to Christmas morning in Nashville. And a lot of people are going to recognize this story because it made national headlines.
Yeah. Christmas of 2020 was that first COVID Christmas. There was no vaccine. It's kind of like a lonely Christmas. And we had lived in Nashville. I had moved there in 2013. My husband had been there a few years before me, but this is going to be our first Christmas in Nashville just because it wasn't really safe to travel or take germs to grandma's house. So it's kind of an unlucky year to stay home, but we stayed home and really leaned into, I kind of went turbo on all the things like, it's okay. We're having the elf on the shelf and we're going to do all the gingerbread houses and just really like leaned into it. So we really enjoyed ourselves. And we had a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, 2 little boys. And we lived downtown in this historic district, really, really beautiful, kind of a postcard, maybe looked like somewhere in Soho, New York City, gorgeous street with cobblestone. And we loved it. We loved our life downtown. It was an unconventional place for a small family, or even just kids. It's more of like a honky tonk district, but we loved it. We jumped in. We would take our kids to the honky tonks in the daytime and just jump in and out of them and dance to a couple songs and go on. We just loved it. We loved our life downtown. And yeah, our 4-year-old, he was kind of a special case. He's a redhead. So all those, like me, all those stereotypes that come along with that, he just had really big feelings from day one, from the moment he was born. He just has really big feelings. So in particular, we were excited for Christmas for him because we had really used the elf on the shelf as like a positive, motivator. And he tried so hard. And that is a lot for him. Every day in December. He really tried. So we were so excited. And to kind of like overcompensate for being alone and not having any family, we had like some really big fun, like this giant slide that went down our small 900 square foot apartment. But I was like, is this going to live in this hallway? I don't even care. Where do we put it? It'd be amazing.
Parenting during COVID.
It's totally, I'm like, we need a blow up house. So we did a really fun Christmas Eve. We did the matching jammies and did fudge and the Christmas story and put the kids to bed. And then it was really pretty magical. My husband and I then, stuffed the stockings and assembled the toys and finished wrapping some things to Hallmark Christmas movies, like real cheesy movies, and ate fudge. And it was really magical. So we went to bed about 2 a.m. And to my memory, it was just a few minutes before 6 a.m. I remember 5:55 that we heard pounding on our door. Now, our building probably has about 32 units in it. It's 4 stories tall. And most of the units had turned into Airbnbs just because it was such a hot district. So as far as I know, there were only 2 other units that had permanent tenants in the building. So we were used to loud noise in the hallway. On our floor, we were the only permanent residents. So we're like, they got the wrong door, coming in drunk or loud. We did not think of it. But the pounding kept going, kept getting really, really loud. And we finally kind of broke through into our subconscious. They were saying Metro Police, open the door. So I went to the door and opened the door, and there were 2 officers there saying that there was a public safety threat in the area and we needed to evacuate immediately. And that felt so vague. And I was also half asleep. So I was like, what? Evacuate? And what is going on? And at the same time, the other doors opening and the other doors opening, and people who are renting, everyone is so confused. And these poor officers, young night shift officers, I imagine that they were pretty new to the force if they had to do the overnight shift on Christmas. But they were like, come on, guys, get out. And everyone's like, I don't understand. So they're telling us to get out and to go down the back stairwell, not to go out the front entrance, which we would later find out was where the RV was parked. And so I said, okay, but it's 6 a.m. It's 20 degrees outside. And it's Christmas morning and we have kids. Is this really necessary? Me trying to convey you're completely ruined Christmas morning or the big reveal in that magical moment. And there was a man and a woman, and just like she stopped in her frenzy and her eyes got super wide and worried. And she said, you have kids, but please get them and get out. And just that moment was the moment that it really connected in my heart, that kind of woman to woman moment of we've got to protect the innocence. Like, if you want to be stupid and stay, I'm done arguing with you guys. We'll get the kids.
Yeah.
I just felt it in my heart, just like an alarm siren was going off in my heart. So I went in and had to have the same conversation with my husband, who was like saying the same, what? Where are we going to go? This is ridiculous. And he had lived in Manhattan for 10 years. So he was like, this kind of ridiculous stuff happens all the time. I'm not going anywhere. I had to decide, like, are we going to split up on Christmas Day and be in a fight? And that was really hard because I really had put so much into that morning, and to be the one that was going to ruin it potentially. I was like, but the feeling would not go away. I kept checking in. So I said, okay, honey, I am going to take Benji, he's our 4-year-old, down to the car. And then and if you're not there, if you don't meet me there with Jude, the baby, I'm going to come back up and I'm going to get Jude and we're going to go. And I'd really love for you to come with us. But that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
So
that alone is such a hard moment to just stay with your own intuition and move forward in that when you have someone you respect and love and your partner in life. Like, nah, I've seen this before, kind of thing.
I wanted to stay. I was like, I put in a lot here. This is what a tragedy. So I thought that's all in comparison now. So I took Benjamin and I pulled him out of bed asleep, and he was in pajamas. We were in pajamas. We put on our shoes by the door, coats by the door, and then diaper bag hangs by the door. I just grabbed the diaper bag, thinking we'd be back. In our minds, they were going to block off the street or the building, and then in like 2 hours we could come back. And little things had happened like that in the past before. Someone had left a backpack on the sidewalk, so then they clear the whole block until they figure out what's in the backpack. So that's what we were thinking. So I took Benjamin down and was buckling him in. And then as I turned around to go get to my husband and the baby, they came down the stairs. It was such a like tender sight because you just have this little 1-year-old in pajamas, wide-eyed coming down the stairs. So we got in our car and we drove away, and we live right on the river. So we crossed the bridge and went on the freeway. And my husband was like, "Okay, now what? What's your plan?" And I was like, "I don't know. Maybe McDonald's had open." No, P.S. It was not open. So I looked back at our skyline, as now we're kind of like paralleling the city skyline, trying to think like, well, we could just go hang out in one of the hotel lobbies that we love, and maybe we just hang out nearby until they clear it. And as I'm looking at the skyline, this massive explosion happens, and a huge fireball at 2 to 3 times the height of the building just went up above the building into the sky. And it was so loud, it also kind of jolted the car. And my husband was looking at the road. He wasn't looking at the skyline. So he thought someone had rear-ended us, because it literally like jolted our car forward. And I just started saying, "Oh, that's us, babe, that's us, that's us, that's us."
Mm.
And it took, felt like an eternity to kind of sink in what just happened. I said, "There was an explosion. That's us." So we immediately turned back around, and which was stupid in hindsight, but I just had to see like what was left of our building, what was happening. So we pulled back around. I jumped out of the car and just ran towards the epicenter of the blast. And my husband stayed in the car with the kids and got my phone and started videoing. And it just was a scene of wartime devastation. As I got closer to the front of the street, there just every window within eyesight was shattered out, and every alarm of every different building was blaring, and their lights were flashing, and there was tons of smoke. There had been cars parked along the street. We also parked along Second Avenue on the next block, but it still totaled our other car.
Wow.
But the ones really next to the bomb were still catching on fire, or things were
Mm.
popping and still exploding. And just big chunks of the buildings just crumbling to the ground in front of me. And because it had just happened, there was no scene set up, no boundaries. So I got in there pretty close and was just in shock at what was happening. So we later came to find out
Was
that
there Let me ask you really fast. Were you able, like, when you're in shock like that, were you able to say, also, look at this thing that happened. I understand the gravity of it. And also that's all my there's my house. That could have been like, what was it that was able to go through your mind when you're in shock like that?
yes, I mean, even from seeing as soon as the blast happened from the road, I said, "I am so glad we left."
Mm.
Because especially from across the street, we couldn't see the extent of it at all. And just like, we left, we left. I'm so glad. Like you said, I stuck to my guns, and at the risk of, a very tense situation with my spouse, I was so glad that I had listened to my heart. And I
Mhm.
was, and then I just looked around. I was like, I have everything I need right here in this car. I have everything I need. Um, yeah, that was the first thing, going through my mind. So as we checked it out, we really still had no idea what had happened. And we would come to find out, I don't even think it was until like the next day. I don't know if they
Mhm.
even found it out that day, that a man had loaded his RV with explosives and had parked it in front of our building. And it was a suicide bomb, and he blew it up. It was a really eerie, weird situation where he had a loudspeaker that started issuing a warning that this vehicle would explode in 15 minutes. So that is how the officers had kind of been tipped off that
Mm.
something might happen. And I don't even think they thought it was serious. It was just so
Yeah.
weird. But
Yeah.
that is why they started. There were just 6 night shift officers that were just going building to building, trying to evacuate who they could.
Mm.
And this is a busy, busy street all year long. So I cannot emphasize enough that it is truly like the first great miracle is that no one was killed. It
Yeah.
just we'd lived there for years and years. There's not a quiet moment on that street. So just between picking perhaps the quietest moment that street would ever see 6 a.m. on a
Yeah.
Christmas morning. And then issuing that warning felt very clear. Loss of life was not the goal. Yeah, we just felt like this was such a miracle.
Wow.
We made it out.
It's interesting to experience something like this on Christmas morning, like a morning that is supposed to be like walking the like everything you talked about. And I think anyone listening knows trying to put that together or either experiencing it where your kids are going to get to walk out and have this moment and they went to bed knowing that Santa was going to come. Tell me how all of that unfolded with your kids and dealing with that as a mom while dealing with like, oh my
Yes.
gosh, our lives we're alive and our home is in shambles.
Yeah, that's such a great question because it was so multifaceted. I think it's sometimes also hard to remember that. So as I said, Benjamin, he is tricky. Plan switching of any kind is just a disaster for
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
So we had to learn very carefully how to avoid ever telling him we were going to go somewhere. I usually couldn't tell him we had a play date of any kind until it was happening,
Mhm.
things like this. Or we were even going on a trip. We couldn't just, it was like, guess what? I'm packing right now and we're leaving in 2 hours. That's about all we could tell him. So for this big month-long buildup, we were really, really scared. So he unfortunately was looking and saw the explosion as
Mm.
well. And he just kind of started kicking and screaming, thrashing back and forth in his car seat, just screaming like, my house, my Christmas, my
Mm.
house, my
Mm.
Christmas. And I was pretty worked up too, saying, this is us, that was us. And my husband had to say, no, you've got to calm down. You're freaking Benjamin out. So then I got it together. And, but then once we had gone back and surveyed the damage, got back in our car, we were like, now what? Now what? So we had the leader of our church congregation, we call him our bishop, he had been awake and had actually texted us, hey, are you guys okay? And we're like, we're okay. Our house isn't okay. We don't really know what's going on, but I don't think we're going to go back for a while. And they said, come on over, head on over. We're awake. And so we went to his house and this was the really extra hard part. They were celebrating their Christmas. They had 3 kids.
Mm.
They were opening their gifts. And I mean, Benji, we left him in the car and I was like, we cannot bring him in here.
Yeah.
He is going to flip out. Just watching other people. And we were also like, oh, we're such a downer right now. We shouldn't want to sit there ruining someone's Christmas morning. So they were so kind and had said, we have this basement apartment, it's unoccupied. You can just have it. And we just knew like, we can't be here today, at least at all. So they were so kind and lent us a pack and play. And my husband said, I know where to go. I know where to go. We have a friend. His name's Terry Henderson. He is one of the biggest angels in our life. My husband used to own a nursing home out in a town called Crossville, about 2 hours outside of town. And just the years that we had since sold it, but in the years that he had run and operated it, this gentleman, Terry, had helped with various projects and they had become really good friends. An older man in his 60s from Ohio had been married and divorced, but never had children, which is very unlikely. But he and Benjamin, when Benjamin was born, were like kindred spirits. They
Mm.
just had this connection. It was so beautiful. And my husband's father passed away when he was 3. So we were
Mm.
already shy when grandpa, and we just felt like Terry just came into that spot and he would just had the most lovely relationship with our children. And on top of that, he is a Jehovah's Witness. And so what we didn't realize we needed, but was exactly what we needed to go somewhere that my kids loved. Also, part of that culture, I've known several wonderful Jehovah's Witnesses. A joke is that they over gift all year long to their kids,
Uh-huh.
kind of compensate for the celebrations that are going on
Right.
in the community around them that they don't participate in, like birthdays and Christmas. So every time we had gone out to spend a weekend with Terry, literally 10 presents high, a stack of wrapped gifts waiting for him. So over the years, we had accumulated an entire closet full of toys. So it really was my children's happy place. And Terry let them walk around dripping popsicles and whatever they wanted. He even bought them 2 little like Mercedes trucks or vehicles to actually, that I would never buy my children. It was really like the most spoiled, wonderful, happy place to them. So when we said we're going to go to Terry's house, Benjamin just seemed to forget all about Christmas. Like, great, we'll go to Terry's house. So as we got there, I just realized this is probably, I'm a very faithful person, and I believe in things preparing us for trials, things in trials, things after trials, that are just divinely sent. And I think that was one of our biggest miracles, is that we had curated this deep and affectionate friendship with this person that my children loved. When we showed up on Christmas Day, not only was he so wonderful to take us in, but there was not one evidence in his house that Christmas was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exactly what we needed. We just needed to kind of pause on it and set it aside until later. So it never came up again with our kids.
Wow.
And we stayed with him for 2 weeks. He was so great and just fed us and tended to our every need. And when we found an Airbnb to stay in, then our friends just brought over their Christmas tree, like little elves, and set it up and did lights. And we just redid Christmas about 2 weeks later. One of the most beautiful acts of service that was also given to us. A coworker of my husband's reached out to a local friend, Kristen, who was kind of she was like our disaster manager. And she said, can you find out exactly what was under their Christmas tree? Because I want to replace those exact gifts. And that was so huge, because we started getting donations and just things of every different kind. And I thought it's such a strange place to be in, because you're so grateful, but then you're also like, I just want what I had.
Yeah.
I miss it. Just somehow magnifies that your life is gone.
Yeah.
But the things were so specific, what my kids, wanted or would bring them joy. And so that coworker gathered a pool of money from work, and they purchased the gifts that had been under our tree. And we just redid Christmas Eve and we redid Christmas morning. And I think if you'd ask my son now, he thinks, Christmas happened. And I don't think he's quite aware that it happened later.
Right. Oh, that makes me so emotional. Like, I'm like, I don't know if I can ask a question right now, because that's so beautiful how so many people came in to help. And it's also amazing. I love what you said about the preparing you for the various things you're going to go through, and to have that friend who wouldn't have any trace of Christmas for those first 2 weeks. That's really, really incredible. So we met in journalism school, and then we went on to work together in Las Vegas in news. And actually, you're like the reason I got that Las Vegas job. So we'll just put that.
You're the reason you got that Las Vegas job, but it always does help to know a friend.
It helps to know a friend. So thank you for that. But when we're in news, we cover the story, and then we like go on, and we don't, even when we do like the update stories, we never address what it's actually like to live through something like that. Like what lives in the emotional and mental scarring that happens in a situation like that. Was that when you started to like notice things coming up, was that totally unexpected?
Yeah, I think I was so surprised that my husband seemed like he was real steady. Seemed pretty unaffected. Other than, we were stressed out, and we were getting even tense with each other about, there were meetings. Now we were staying 2 hours out of town, but we needed to go there were lots of different meetings with the FBI that would let us kind of get close to the scene, and then a little closer and then a little closer. So just different things that were happening were really tense between us. But on the whole, he seemed to handle it really well. I was a total wreck. And as I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I didn't eat for days. Sweet Terry would bring in a tray of food and then come back in 2 hours later and it hadn't been touched. And he's like, she needs to eat. It was really, really heavy for me. So I struggled with it right away. The baby, the 1-year-old, he was fine. My kids seemed unsettled in that mom is crying all day long, sobbing, just also in her room and not really interacting with us. So I was kind of throwing off the family in that way. And when I was able to start talking to a counselor, the mental health help that we got was such a huge part of our story. And I felt so lucky. And it is not lost on me how lucky we were that we had access to that because it was such a high profile federal crime. We were able to get access to really great counseling.
Mm.
And I have such a yearning inside of me to help that become a reality, more accessible for other people going through hard times that aren't going to just qualify for free counseling because their thing wasn't high profile, but it was so hard as well. So I was gifted a counselor through the police department, like a 20-year veteran. She even had clients that had had their houses bombed.
Mm.
So she just was excellent in helping me start to develop coping strategies. And then I just needed that help from day one. And for my kids, she said, the sooner you're steady, your kids will steady out, that they are taking cues from you how to react to the situation. And that also really helped me kind of like pull yourself together, Noelle. You gotta get it together for the kids. And then for my son, my older son, his was so curious because we just, watched him, and he was in his favorite place with Terry Henderson, doing all the favorite things. And then in the Airbnb, it felt like such an adventure. We were there for 2 months while we searched for a home. We found a string of miraculous events in that horrible, horrible, cutthroat, all cash, no inspections, real estate world that we were dealing it with. When we got our house, that is when his PTSD. I was kind of like, oh, now we can settle. Now we can make a home again. And I was kind of thinking like, this is the arrival point, and then we'll be better. It wasn't better for me. It was really blue. It was almost like a post incident depression kind of set in there because we moved about 40 minutes away, and on the corner of our neighborhood is a cow pasture where we were like in the hustle and bustle. It was like we moved to another world. So there was a big culture shock there. Our decision was driven by what preschool program could we get our son into now, because he really needs some structure and some help after all of this unrest. And that is the area it led us to. So it was so different. Culture shock, a cul-de-sac with so many kids in it, which was, we thought, amazing, but that just turned out to really stress out our son. So in the beginning it was great, but then eventually as the weeks went on, we'd pull into our driveway and the cute kids would run up to you, like, hi Benji, let's play. And you would open the door, and I know you have a lot of experience with this, and just run away. Run away. And we live on a busy street, or else then there's sort of this like green area that's a flood overflow plain, which I know snakes are living in there. Just every direction was not good for a 4-year-old to run away in. So that would be really, really hard, just bolting after him or trying to even find him and get him back. And I had never heard of this term before, but he was in like a dissociative state. Where we couldn't even get through to him. It was almost like he was having a seizure. He was crashing and screaming, and we'd have to kind of hold him down and bring him inside and try to calm him down with the very limited skills that we had. And in the end, we'd all just be drenched in sweat and exhausted. And then I would privately go away for a minute and cry in my bathroom because it was so hard to watch and to know how to help him. So at that point, we called and said, I think our son needs counseling now, and we don't know how to help him. I don't have tools for this. So another place that was receiving funding was Catholic Charities. They have a really big presence here, and they're such a wonderful organization. So we were able to get counseling services for my 4-year-old through Catholic Charities. And that was just a total game changer. We would go weekly. We went for about 8 or 9 months and did play therapy. It felt so slow. I'd be like, you guys are just playing with sand all day. What's happening? But as I came to see, that was just building the trust and waiting till it very organically came out of him. The things that he had seen and was feeling, and we emerged from that so beautifully. I think already I feel like we needed extra tools to help Benjamin and his real feelings. I always say I feel like we had this little bonfire of a human, and then the bombing just poured gasoline over it. It just like exploded. So we were super grateful to have all of these really great coping techniques now for him that we employ regularly,
Mhm.
uh, and just we're just helping him grow up better.
Yeah.
So that
When
we
he
are so
was
grateful for that.
when he was in counseling, was that and he kinda talked about what he had seen, was that the first time he talked about it? Or had
Yeah,
he talked about it with you? Wow.
yeah, I think so. He had kind of like we had some speckled moments of asking, and I was really afraid of what he would ask because I felt very ill prepared. And I think it was just like 1 week later, the FBI let us just walk on the riverfront park to look up at our windows, which was just torture because they were shattered, but our Christmas tree was right there and stockings were like all
Mm.
wonky. And it was just like this frozen timestamp. And we were with a group of owners. Most people own it and live out of town because it's a
Yeah.
rental property for them. So we're standing there in a clump looking up at our building, most of them not knowing us. And we heard someone say, "Oh, how sad. They must have children." I was like,
Oh,
we do have children.
oh my
It is
gosh.
sad. So I had thankfully that day, one of the FBI workers, her background had been in counseling.
Mhm.
And I just said, I have a 4-year-old. I'm not sure how to answer him. And she said, be honest, be super concise, but be honest and direct. And I was like, well, what about when he's like, why did that man do that horrible thing? How do I explain to this innocent person the darkness? I just don't even want him to know. And she said, yeah, I mean, I think a good route, if this feels, good, right to you, would be to say, sometimes bad people do, or when people's minds are sick, when, like our bodies are sick. And this is what I ended up telling him. When our bodies are sick, we go to the doctor, like Dr. Smith, and she helps us get healthy. Sometimes people's minds get sick. If they go to the doctor to help them get healthy, then they can do really bad things because their minds are really sick and they didn't get help. And one random day in the Airbnb, he had kind of like asked a few little questions, nothing too much. But he was playing with a truck, and all of a sudden he goes, "Mom, I know the bombing happened, but why did it happen?"
Mm.
And that was the moment I had to say, she had given me a really great way to say it to him. And he just, I said exactly that. He said, huh, okay. And then went on. So that was the extent of our conversation. So
Yeah.
in counseling, we really did uncover that he saw it, and it, made him so upset. And I think even the culture shock of moving was really the hardest part. But then he had this sense of loss start to permeate every area. So we would have just friends that we've known forever come over, to our friends really gathered near and gathered around us often. So they would come over and all their kids would come over. And as they would get ready to leave, okay, say bye to your buddy, he's leaving. Benjamin would then start to just melt down, crying
Mm.
and protesting. And I had to take him aside and say, "What's up, buddy? Why are you so upset?" And then he said, he's going home and he's going to take all my toys with him. And now I'm going to lose everything again, just like on Christmas morning.
Oh.
Just feels like
Mhm.
he couldn't keep hold of his stuff. And so that was a lot of reassuring. We really just backed off the play dates
Mm.
for several months, and just played alone. And it was lonely, but we just had to kind of give him space to feel safe and to be able to see our stuff isn't going anywhere this time. So it was a long road for him, but
Mhm.
I don't really, he doesn't really talk about it or think about it anymore. And if he does, we make it very open and normal. We don't want to
Yeah.
make it this scary taboo thing we whisper about. But we're grateful that now that time has gone by, it doesn't get talked about that much in the home.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you guys were very aware and you kept your eyes on him. And even when he wasn't saying it and he was acting out, you knew that you needed to go get him into someone to do the play therapy, and that made all the difference. Okay. We've run out of time, but I have two questions I want to ask you. So one is, from this time, what helped you the most? What coping strategy helped you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the grounding really, really helped me. Like I said, I started to have panic attacks. And it was such a foreign world to me. I didn't know what it was. So I had assembled this handful of things that I took with me everywhere. Aromatherapy, an aromatherapy roller. The smell was really, and I've heard other people say that it is so powerful to kind of bring you into the present instead of spiraling out wherever your mind is going. That, and then just building in, I think that was so heavy was that because it was COVID, my parents couldn't come out, for example. There was no vaccine yet. So I just had to carry so much with two kids that weren't ever going anywhere during the day and were feeling very needy. So my counselor had taught me just to build in micro moments throughout the day, treating myself through one of my five senses. And even if it was 30 seconds between blocks of 2-hour phone calls with insurance and school districts, I would take out my smelly lotion that I loved. I would rub it in my hands and just take that 30 seconds and know I intentionally gave myself the self-care I could give. And then I've got to jump back into it. And just those little drops along the way really sustain me. And I still, when I'm feeling run down or overwhelmed, just here in life, I intentionally make a break, or like, I'm going to go pour some lemonade, into a cup instead of water, and just really enjoy that flavor. And yeah, just, I think really taught me to connect with my senses to get through overwhelming stuff.
That's so powerful because right now, I think we've gotten a little bit far from self care where it has to be like a 2-week vacation or a girls' weekend or even like, even getting your hair done, which isn't something we were doing in the pandemic. So I love that. I think that's really, really helpful. Okay, the last question. I'm so sad it's the last question, but it is. It's the one that I ask everyone. It's what is your number one tip to finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in between?
I think it is, I guess I would say kind of like a gratitude journal approach to what you're going through. A thing that also really, really impacted our story and continues to just help us find joy. I made a phone call to my aunt early on, who's kind of a spiritual advisor to me. And she said, Noelle, this is a miracle. You got out. This is a miracle. And just wait what the Lord has in store for you. I'm excited to see, frankly. And here I am in like the same pajamas I've worn for 4 days because I don't own
Mm.
clothes. I was like, you're excited. But she just really, she said, just watch, wait and see like what the Lord is going to do for you. I'm so excited for the miracles that lay ahead. And so then I started to see everything in that sort of gratitude lens way, that things that happened I counted to us as miracles or blessings or just even things we were super grateful for. And when we moved into the new house and I kind of had that post event depression, one night I was saying my prayers before bed, and I just, I was saying, Lord, I'm struggling, and I don't know what to do about it. And I just had the thought, make a vision board. And instead of dreams which I've never made a vision board, I was even like, I think I'm gonna have to Google vision board, Lord. I'm not sure how this works, but I'm here, I'm listening. But he was like, make a vision board, and instead of dreams you hope to see in the future, this is going to be miracles and blessings you've seen in your recent past.
Wow.
And we went, and I'm not crafty, so it is like a janky looking project, but I went and got poster board that week, and we cut out a bunch of little slips of paper, and just as a family started writing down, what were the miracles, what are the amazing things we've seen. And it was the first thing I hung up on our walls, and it's still hanging there in my bedroom. And I've kept that stack of paper, and we add to it every few weeks. Something else happens, and I'm like, that was a miracle or a blessing from the bombing. And it really, when I think about it, I just think of all of the good people that came. That was the most beautiful thing. There was one bad man at the epicenter, but every ripple out, hundreds and hundreds of good people we knew, strangers, really just showing up and blessing us. And I look at it with a positive lens instead of a negative one. And I think whatever we're going through, if we can write it down visually or whatever helps you the most, to kind of focus on, remember it, I really think that just impacts your happiness.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. I love that. It's the opposite of the vision board. It's the what do you want to call it? The miracle board?
Yes,
I
actually,
mean,
that is
that's what
my
it is. Like that's amazing. That is incredible. I have never heard that before. I want to start that immediately with my family. That's amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you for revisiting some of the worst moments of your life for your sharing of your story.
Yeah, thanks for having it. It was the best of times and the worst of times. It was both,
Yeah.
So we're glad to be on the other side of it. For sure.
It is wild how the worst things can be held at the same time as some of the best things.
Yeah, grief and gratitude, they coexist. And it's beautiful. It's hard and it's beautiful.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Noelle. I just absolutely loved all of the things that I got to learn from her in this conversation. And also, I just loved hearing her voice because it had been so many years. And as always, thanks so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.